We'll just give it a few minutes to let people in. I can see they're coming in now.
Ezra, people are saying that they can't join the meeting for some reason. They're writing on Facebook, on our Facebook, that they can't join. There's some people on our end who are trying to get in.
Andrea, do you know why that would be? Are they in the waiting room?
No, there's no waiting room. They should be able to join.
Go straight in.
Yeah.
Is there a link that you can send me easily that I can then just copy and paste and put in?
Yeah, sure. I'll do that.
We'll just give it one more minute, everybody, before we start, as people are entering.
Oh. Yeah, I don't know why people are having a tricky time getting in. Is there a meeting ID?
There's no meeting ID. I mean, yes, there is, but no password. This is the ID. Yes, there is, but no password.
Still having issues, Michael?
We're getting people in. I see some people in. I think that somebody just posted the wrong link on our end somewhere. I'm not sure why that happened. It's possible that there's an issue actually, Ezra, in the link from your webinar. On your page. This is
On our Facebook page.
just on the on the invite.
Yes, I'm seeing that now. It's another send link. It's not the correct one.
It's the wrong link in your in the Facebook invite. That's what's happened. So there's one link in the mail out that you sent, but there's a different link on the Facebook.
Right. But if they go to the Facebook page, they can see it. So I just did that on my phone. Yeah.
That's true. There are 10 people watching on the page itself. Hey everyone, if you are watching on the page, I'm going to try and post the link. Getting a message. Oh, hi Branya, you can see and hear me. There are some people who can't get in.
I just must start the introduction now. Mike, what do you reckon?
Sure.
Yeah. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we gather today and pay my respects to the elders, past and present. I'm Ezra May, President of the ASPJ, the Australian Society of Polish Jews and their Descendants. The ASPJ aims to preserve and promote the historical and cultural heritage of Jewish life in Poland and to foster understanding between current and future generations of the Polish and Jewish communities. Like everyone, the COVID-19 pandemic significantly impacted the ASPJ, with our planned 2020 calendar of events almost entirely postponed or cancelled. However, as is always the case, a change in circumstances provides opportunities, and it was a great thrill for the ASPJ to form a partnership with FestivALT, an independent arts collective that produces acclaimed Jewish art and activism based in Kraków, Poland. This ASPJ and FestivALT partnership has already successfully collaborated on a number of online events, tools and performances, specifically curated for an Australian audience, particularly beneficial being the Australian-friendly time slots, and we look forward to furthering this relationship. Our special guest tonight, actually not a guest, but a partner, Michael Rubenfeld, is the co-founder and co-director of FestivALT. After hearing from Michael, there'll be an opportunity for questions. Please submit them via the Q&A comment function. Although this is our final webinar for 2020, ASPJ is busy planning for a bumper 2021. And although we certainly hope to return to live, in-person lectures, events and performances, as part of our suite of programs, we will continue to host regular webinars. We are very pleased to announce tonight that our first guest for 2021 is Dariusz Popilia, a current Polish kayak Olympian who, when not training or competing, runs People, Not Numbers, a unique organisation he founded dedicated to the restoration of the memory of the Jews who lived in his home region. So please keep an eye out for that. If you haven't already, please friend us on Facebook or visit our website, www.polishjews.org.au. I also recommend you join our mailing list. We produce an online magazine, Ain't, 3 times a year, with our latest edition just released last week. Now to tonight. Having just completed a 72-hour The Lucky Jewathon this weekend, which he co-produced, Michael Rubenfeld will tonight provide us with his personal story. Michael is a Polish-Jewish-Canadian artist, director, and theatre curator who has been nominated numerous times for prestigious theatre awards in Canada. In 2012, Michael visited Poland for the first time, undertaking a roots tour with his mother and to research a play he was developing. This ultimately led to a project much larger than he envisaged, resulting in Michael now living in Kraków. In his celebrated iconic performance, The Lucky Jew, Michael takes a common object of Polish folk culture, which many of you may be familiar with, the figurine or picture of an obviously identifiable Jew holding coins, believed to bring good luck, but which surprisingly or unsurprisingly, also others view as perpetuating anti-Semitic stereotypes, and Michael turns this on its head. It's now my great pleasure to welcome and present to you Michael Rubenfeld, the Lucky Jew of Poland.
Hi, thanks, Ezra. Thanks for having me. It's a really funny. That's the first time I've ever been introduced as the Lucky Jew of Poland, but I guess I brought that upon myself, haven't I?
Indeed.
So hi everyone. It's great to be here. It's really an honor. It's been a really great partnership with ASPJ. And I'm really happy to be here today. And as Ezra said, I'm going to give you guys a talk or a presentation about just why the heck I live in Poland. Of course, you know, everyone, this is the Association of the Australian Association of Polish Jews and their descendants. So I'm quite aware that there's already an affinity for Poland amongst this group. So some of what I'm going to say is probably things that you've heard or agree with already. Some of the things you might disagree with, and that's okay. And I'm hoping that we'll be able to talk about that as well afterwards. Now I'm going to share my screen, and I'm hoping that when I share my screen, you can also continue to see my face, but I'm not sure if that's actually possible. What do you think? Are you still able to see me, Ezra, as I'm here? You can still see me. Great. Okay, so I'm going to start. I am the Lucky Jew of Poland for today. I wouldn't necessarily call myself that to others in Poland, but for today I am the Lucky Jew of Poland. I do live in Poland. I am originally from Canada. I'm going to talk about this journey, how I ended up living in Poland and what I'm doing now in Poland. And also a little bit of some of the theories or some of the things that I feel about living in Poland, contemporary Poland today. And I'm looking forward to also talking to you all afterwards. So this is a picture that I'll explain in a little bit. But I'm going to start with, I'm going to start here. These are my grandparents. My maternal grandparents, Shimon on the left and Chava on the right. They are my mother's parents. My grandfather on the left is from a place called Komorówka Podlaska, which is near the Belarusian border. And my grandmother, Chava, is from Wolbrom, which is about an hour away from where I am right now. And you can see on the map, I'm going to show you with my cursor. So here's my grandmother right here. This is where she was born and raised. And here I am in Kraków. So she's just about an hour north of me right now. And then all the way here on the right is where my grandfather Shimon grew up. I am a theater maker. So this means I do several things, including I act. There's a few pictures of me acting. Interestingly, as I was going through these last night, I realized that I mostly act in Jewish roles, which is something that I've been actually pondering since. This is me in a show called Disgraced. This is me in a show called Talk. This is me in a show called Our Class, which is actually a Polish play still running in Poland called Nasza Klasa. And here's me dead in a movie called Lucky Number 11. I was actually, this is the moment just before Bruce Willis comes in. to the scene. This was a very exciting moment in my life. I am also a writer. So I write plays. On the left, you can see I write, and I often perform in the plays that I write. So you can see me in a play called The Book of Judith, which I made on the top left. The bottom right is me performing in a play called Spain that I also wrote. And on the top right is a play called My Fellow Creatures, which I wrote. I also produce. So I'm the producer of a venue at the Edinburgh Festival Fringe called Canada Hub, which has been happening for 4 years. Sadly, we weren't there this year, and it's not looking good for next year either, to be honest. This is another show that I produced called Counting Sheep about the Ukrainian Revolution, the most recent one, not the first one, the second one. And there's this play here. This is a play called We Keep Coming Back. And we could say that the journey really began here with this play. Ezra talked about it in his opening narrative as well. So this is a piece that I made with my mother. And I made this piece because as a theater artist, one of the things that I like to do is I like to take problems that I'm having a difficult time solving from my real life, and I like to dramatize them. And the idea is that through the dramatization of these problems, I'll somehow be able to find certain resolutions. And so I was having problems with my mother, which, if you're Jewish, which I'm assuming the majority of you are, you might be familiar with the Jewish mother, Jewish son conundrum. And one of my theories was that the problems that my mother and I were having were connected to the deficit in a shared collective history that we could feel good about. My grandparents, who I introduced to you earlier, were both survivors. My grandmother survived the camps, several camps, including Auschwitz, and my grandfather survived by jumping off of a train on the way to Treblinka. He and his sister managed to squeeze through a window on a train, and then miraculously were able to hide in the forest, and then were found by the Polish partisans, where they fought for the rest of the year, or for the rest of the war, excuse me. But as a result, the narrative that we had around Poland in this place that they were from was quite negative. They lost their entire family during the war, the majority of their family during the war. And so this place called Poland that my mother and I were from was not something that we talked about. This is probably not an unfamiliar narrative for a lot of people. Or when we did talk about it, it was always through the lens of the Holocaust. And so I felt almost as if we were from the Holocaust, which for some might be a controversial statement. But because we had no real relationship to Poland, it was a feeling that we had. And we had no relationship to this country that we were actually from. And so I proposed to my mother that she and I return to Poland. We go to Poland and we see where we're from, and we try to develop a relationship that was not only rooted in misery to this place that we were from, and through developing that relationship, we would be able to develop a more positive relationship to each other. My mother agreed to go on this wild trip with me. And we came back, and after the trip, we made this piece. And this piece is called We Keep Coming Back. And yes, you can see this is me and my real mom in the performance, if anyone wondered. This is my real mother performing. She's not a performer. However, she agreed to get on stage. She would say because she loves me that much. But I secretly think she just wanted to be a star. And she really is a star in this performance. You can see this is me and my mother in the, amidst a very tense moment. We used a lot of projection in the show. The show is really a retelling, or a dramatized retelling of the journey that we took coming to Poland. So this is us sort of at the beginning in the research phase where we couldn't even pronounce the names where we were from. This is me tracking our trip. This is a kind of wild dancing moment when I after I've introduced a woman who I meet in Poland, and you can see this is actually the technician in the show dancing with her face over his face. These are some of our family members. And then here on the left is a woman named Katkareshka. Katkareshka, who is someone that you should all know if you don't know, is the third part of this performance. I'm not going to get too much into it, and I recommend, Ezra, that you actually consider bringing Katka in for a talk at some point. Katka wrote a book called "The Return of the Jew." God, I hope that's right. "The Return of the Jew," which is probably it's probably one of the leading scholars, or the book is probably one of the most important books in chronicling the kind of re-Jewing of Poland, in a way, people discovering their Jewish roots and deciding to re-become Jewish. Katka, when we went to Poland, we realized we didn't speak any Polish, and so we needed a guide. And so we literally found Katka on the internet, and she agreed to come with us. And she ended up chronicling the trip. She's also a filmmaker. She was our translator, and she also agreed to perform in the show. And you can see, this is the three of us in the performance. Here's a few more shots of the three of us in this performance. This is us arriving in Komorówka Podlaska, which is my grandfather's hometown. And that ended up being where the majority of the play takes place, in Komorówka Podlaska. Here's us. Oh, a few of these have gotten small. Anyways. Here's us discovering that we actually went to the wrong Komorówka Podlaska, because we didn't know in Poland. There are many places are called, have the same name. And here's us fighting, and this is the final moments of the play. This is actually something that I'm hoping to bring to Australia at some point. We were actually in plans to see about figuring out how to do it before COVID. And this is the end of the play, and this is important because you can see that we all came back to Poland. You can see it's written here. We all came back to Poland for Michael and Magda's wedding at the oldest synagogue in Krakow. And indeed, the play ended up becoming a catalyst for what my life has now become. And because of this journey into Poland, I ended up meeting a woman named Magda Korolewska, who's now Magda Rubenfeld Korolewska, who's also now my wife. And you can see here is a picture of us being married in the old synagogue in Krakow. If you look down on the left, you can see my mother sitting there. At the bottom left, on the right is Magda's mother, Anna. And on the left is Rabbi Tanya Segal, who's actually the first female rabbi to, as far as we know, ever do a wedding in Poland, the first female rabbi. And she married us. Here's a few more pictures from the wedding. A few more pictures as well. So this is the old synagogue, which many of you are probably familiar with. Many of you have potentially even been. It normally operates as a museum. However, we used it as a synagogue for our wedding. And the wedding itself was open. We wanted to make sure that anyone who wanted to come and witness could, because as you can imagine, there aren't that many Jewish weddings that happen in Poland. And we felt it was important for the public to be allowed in to experience something that would have been experienced many, many, many times over before the war. This is us on Szeroka. After the wedding, we made the decision to very publicly march down Szeroka, which for those who have been to Kraków know that, or those who are Polish speakers, means wide, the wide street, which was sort of the center of the former Jewish space in Kazimierz, which is the former and potentially current Jewish district of Poland. There's been actually a lot of debate as to how to refer to contemporary Kazimierz. We also felt it was important to have this public parade through Kazimierz. We wanted to make a spectacle, a little bit of a spectacle, or at least a public celebration of being Jewish, of having a Jewish wedding, an important Jewish ritual in Poland. Because again, it's very, very rare that you might get the opportunity to see something like this. And here's us dancing at the wedding. And after the wedding, Magda and I had a choice. We could choose to live in Canada, where I was from, or we could choose to live in Poland, where she was from, and ostensibly so was I. And that was the moment when I decided we decided that we would live in Poland together, and we do now. Why do we decide to live in Poland? It's an interesting question that I continue to get from people in and outside of Poland. Many Jews are so confused by why I might live here, particularly because of the Poland narrative. Now, the Poland narrative is something that I grew up with, and a lot of Jews grew up with. Certainly, as a Canadian, it was not a positive narrative. The Poland narrative is this. The Poland narrative is this. The Poland narrative is this. And it's then Israel. At least that was my version of the Poland narrative. The March of the Living, for example, was a trip that I almost took, and I was quite looking forward to taking, because I wanted to go to what I understood to be a hellhole, the hellhole that is Poland, in order to be able to go to Israel, which is now the homeland. So you can imagine my surprise when I got to the hellhole and discovered it was anything but. So this is an image, a few images of some of the incredible things that are happening in Poland, and the incredible Jewish things that are happening in Poland. So the top left-hand corner is an image of the final night of the Jewish Culture Festival. So you can see here a stage, and this is actually Soroka, which is the same street that we paraded down. And just here in the corner on the left where my cursor is, you can actually see the synagogue itself where we were married. So this is the old synagogue, and this giant stage with thousands of people crowd in the middle, who crowd the street for the final concert, which lasts about 10 hours. It's really magnificent. Here in the top right-hand corner is Platz Nova, which is the former, Platz Nova, and this is a place called the Okrągłak, which is the former Jewish butcher. And it was a former market. Now down on the left is the Temple Synagogue, which before the war is the progressive synagogue. It's not operating as a synagogue right now, but it's used quite a lot for Jewish things, including the concerts during the Jewish Culture Festival. It's magnificent, as you can see. We almost used it as our wedding, but I think selfishly, I knew that I wanted to be the star, but it's impossible to be the star when you go into this synagogue. The synagogue is the star. And on the bottom right-hand corner is the Warsaw JCC, which is my favorite JCC in Poland, partly because it really is a community center. You can see it in the middle of the summer. People are literally sitting out on the streets. Agata Rakowiecka, who's also an incredible leader of that Jewish community center, someone who I think everyone should know about and the work that she's doing. These are a few of the things that inspire me. Holy moly. I was absolutely flabbergasted. I thought I was going to Poland to just sort of go and see the absence, the deficit of Jewish culture. And I literally had no idea that Jewish culture was still going on. I didn't even know that Jews continue to exist in Poland. And so you can imagine just how flipped my brain was going. This was not what I expected. What did I expect? Well, I won't return to those pictures, but I really expected I expected almost a black and white country, to be honest. I expected to see only remnants of Auschwitz, to see just the devastation. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of devastation, but I did not expect to see new life in Poland, new Jewish life in Poland. And this is really, this was an interesting moment for me because it became a re-entry point back into Judaism for me. So earlier I showed you a lot of my, acting photographs where I'm playing Jews on stage. And to be quite frank, that was basically my Jewish culture. I was paid to play Jews quite frequently. I always identified as a Jew, but I was never really actively involved in Jewish community or Jewish culture in Toronto, where I was living. I'm originally from Winnipeg, but in Toronto, it really didn't interest me. Coming to Poland, something shifted. Once I started coming to Poland and started living in Poland and feeling like this is a place that I'm of, I started to feel that I wasn't just from the Holocaust, but that I'm from a real place, and that this real place is not just a graveyard. There are Jews in Poland. This place that I'm from, which was once arguably the most important pre-war Ashkenazic Jewish space in the world, where I thought, which I thought was completely gone, or I thought all the Jews were gone, is not actually true. There are Jews in Poland, and it's one of the growing, and it's a growing population, which was also completely shocking. And there are many non-Jews involved in Jewish memory and culture. Now, this is a really, really key point for me, because it makes sense to me that the Jews who remain in Poland are still working on Jewish culture or might be involved in Jewish memory. But the fact that there are non-Jews working on Jewish memory, working on Jewish culture, was really what made me feel like it was safe to return to Poland. Because it didn't feel like I needed to be, it didn't feel like I was going only to be a part of Jewish community. It felt like I could go and be a part of Polish society. The way that people think about the intersection of Jewish memory within the context of contemporary Polish society, and the way that non-Jews and Jews are working together to focus on memory in really, really meaningful ways. Really some of the most exciting work in and around Jewish memory and culture is happening by non-Jewish people, by Jews as well, of course, but also by non-Jewish people. And when trying to understand why that might be, a number of people say that they believe that Jewish culture is an essential part of Polish culture. Jewish culture and Polish culture are not separate. And so to be working on Jewish culture is to be working on Polish culture. So people feel like they are working on a culture that belongs, that they identify with. It is their culture. And that was also very surprising. And to me, felt very progressive. And also Poles, I learned that Poles are not all anti-Semites, like my Baba and everyone else told me. That was truly the narrative that I grew up with. And my grandmother really held on to this narrative, even sort of as she moved towards the end of her life. It did start to shift, but she had always said, I wouldn't go to Poland, not for a million years. You should never trust, not for $1 million. She said she would never go. Actually, not long before she died, I actually asked her. I said, "So if I gave you $1 million, would you still not go to Poland?" And she took a pause and she said, "I'd consider it," which was a huge leap, which was amazing. But I did grow up believing that Polish people are all anti-Semitic, and if I came, I would only experience anti-Semitism. This is something that is still rampant amongst Jewish people around the world. I felt comfortable being Jewish in Poland, and it felt meaningful to be a Jew in Poland. I didn't think I would feel as comfortable as I do being Jewish here in Poland. And it's meaningful to be a Jew in Poland to me because I feel like living here, I'm not living here only for myself. I have more family in Poland than I do anywhere else in the world. The majority of, but that family is no longer alive. But this is family who wanted to live in Poland and didn't have that opportunity. This is family who wanted to be alive and didn't have that opportunity. And of course, it's not just my family, it's millions of people who didn't have the opportunity to continue their existence. And so for me, I don't feel like I'm necessarily living only for myself. I feel like I'm also living for them here and continuing the Jewish chain, so to speak. Of course, it's not all rainbows and puppy dogs. There is work to be done in Poland. There is a right-wing government in Poland. This is Kaczynski, Jarosław Kaczynski. He is the head of the Law and Justice Party, Prawo i Sprawiedliwość Party. It's an incredibly right-wing party. And in my opinion, is the biggest obstacle to Poland truly becoming a progressive space. They are anti-LGBTQ, anti-immigrant. They are anti-abortion. Many of you probably know there are ongoing protests, ongoing protests in the streets because the government's recent decision to almost entirely outlaw abortion. They are anti-European Union or anti-Europe. They're anti-constitution. They consistently break the constitution, and they're incredibly nationalist. Interestingly, they're not, in my opinion, terrible for the Jews, which is usually a question that I get with a government like this. It must be bad for the Jews, but it's actually very important to the current government, for the most part, that they maintain somewhat of a positive relationship with Jewish people. You can see on the left is Kaczynski at a Jewish event called From the Depths. On the right, you can see Andrzej Duda at an event at the, I believe that's the Jewish Community Center in Krakow. And the man next to him is Rabbi Michael Schudrich, who I'm sure you all know. He gave the last talk here, and he's the chief rabbi of Poland. However, it's been a long time since Jewish narratives have been allowed to thrive in this country after the war and 40 years of communism. In my opinion, Poland needs more contemporary Jewish narratives, because the way that Jewish culture operates in Poland is still, in my opinion, very strange. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that it's still a very young culture in a contemporary sense. It only began to start to kind of become public again in the 90s when communism ended. Of course, there are not a lot of Jews, but there's a lot of Jewish history. And there continues to be a lot of problems that need to be, in my opinion, resolved. And here are a few examples that I'm going to talk about, things that we've encountered. They're not all of them, because we would be here for a long time, but this is a really important one. So parody. The representation of Jewish culture is often through parody. So here on the left-hand side, this is Soroka, which is the same place that we've already visited for my wedding and for the Jewish Culture Festival, which were two events that were not parody. However, on a normal day, you walk down the street and you see a series of restaurants, which are primarily Jewish-themed restaurants. And I use the word parody because because there's really nothing Jewish about these restaurants. In my opinion, they are using Jewish culture and commodifying it for tourism. Now, a lot of that tourism, and I'm not going to get into this in this talk, but a lot of, this space became an incredibly popular space for tourists. When I say space, I mean Kazimierz in general. After Schindler's List was filmed here, we can go into that at some other point, but it's become a space that we call a Jewish Disneyland or Jurassic Park, because the culture here, the representation is not authentic. and it's not, and these spaces are not run by Jewish people. So on the bottom left is a space called Ariel, which is, in my opinion, the worst of them. Now, I want to be clear, these spaces I've got problems with, but I don't necessarily have problems with the people who are running them. A lot of, it's an open market, and there is a market for these things, and so people are filling the market, and there's no regulation, and so these kinds of things are bound to happen without regulation and education. So this is the inside of Ariel here on the right. You can see just loads and loads of images of Jews on the wall, and a lot of these images are problematic. I'll explain what that means in a second. And then here on the top right-hand corner is a hotel called Shalom Kazimish. Some of you might have been on the tour that Adam Shorin and I give, and we covered this. As you can see, this is the logo for that hotel. It's a $sign with a crown, and the space is called Shalom Kazimish. Anybody would recognize the problems with the use of a $sign in your logo for a Jewish, a so-called Jewish space. Eventually, I think we're going to try and work to get rid of, to force them to change that when we have the time. This is a mask that used to hang in the Ethnographic Museum. The Ethnographic Museum here in Poland, at the bottom, you can't read it, but it says, I think, Maska Żyda, or Mask of a Jew. So this is a Jew mask. It's an old mask, but it used to hang in the Ethnographic Museum, the Krakow Ethnographic Museum. It no longer hangs there, but it used to hang there with no real context. People didn't understand why on earth this mask, this Jew mask, was up there, and then that started to change. They started to build context, and they ultimately took the mask down. But it's indicative of how historical Jewish culture is represented in a space like the Krakow Ethnographic Museum, which for the most part is currently void of any real meaningful conversation around Krakow's former Jewish culture. And of course, in an ethnographic museum, you could imagine why that might be problematic. Now we're doing a lot of work with them. We have a partnership with them, and it's very exciting, and there are shifts happening, but that is an example of the kinds of problems. And another example is, this is a building called Hever Tehillim, was the space that held the former Hever Tehillim congregation before the war. Hever Tehillim means Brotherhood of Psalms. It's now currently a bar. However, not long ago, in the 2000s, these incredible frescoes on the wall were uncovered. They look quite shabby, as you can see in this photo, but they're actually quite magnificent, and it's actually quite rare to see former Jewish images, frescoes on walls that are this clear, that are still in color. So you can see, there's images of Jerusalem. It's really quite a magnificent thing. However, it's being rented to a bar, and that's not the issue so much. The issue is more that, so here it is in a state of renovation. And you can see right here is the niche where the former Arana Kodesh used to be, which held the Torahs. And that's what's there now. This is a door. So the owners of the space put a door where the former Aron HaKodesh used to be. This is also another longer conversation, and it's quite complicated, but the space, they built a door and they named the bar Hevra, which is Hebrew for friends or bros. So they've come on, they've used, and it's also a kind of spin-off of the former Hevra Tehillim, which is the name of the space. And so they've named the building for its history while also destroying the history. There was a lot of protest. A lot of people did not want them to do it. They understood the significance of the space where the former Aron HaKodesh used to be, and they decided to put the door there anyways. So those are some examples of some problems, and then there's these, and we're going to go a bit more into these are what we call lucky Jews, or Jews with coins. In Poland, there's a tradition of buying and selling images of stereotypical looking, Orthodox Jews with money. And they do many different things with this money. They're either counting it or simply just holding it. People buy these images and they put them on their wall because they believe it brings them luck. Here's a few more. This is an image actually from a store called Obi, which is kind of like a Costco. I don't know if you've got Costco in Australia. But you know, there were a major department store, and you could buy these images in major spaces. You no longer can at the Obi, but they are still all over the place. So these are a few of the problems. There's many more. I added even a couple more, and it's a long time. It's kind of a really long list. And you know, as an artist, I thought that it's actually really great for me as an artist. You know, one of the things that artists struggle with is, or can sometimes struggle, is what to make work about. There is absolutely no deficit of ideas of what needs to be made, what to make work about in Poland. And this leads us into contemporary, sort of my contemporary reality, and FestivALT. Now, FestivALT is, this is an image from one of our things. FestivALT is an independent arts collective that we started in 2017. We produce an annual program of critically minded Jewish art and activism in Kraków, Poland. This year, we're not only in Kraków, Poland, we're also virtual and around the world. But in a non-COVID year, although this is a conversation, we're still trying to determine what is the future. I think everyone's asking these questions. But each year we invite artists from Poland and around the world to produce visual art, theater, site-specific performance, activist interventions that engage with the complications of contemporary Jewish Poland. Now, this is something that I started with Magda, who is my wife, whose image you saw during the wedding. We also started with two other American Jews whose roots are in this part of the world, Jason Francisco and Maya Ip. And we continue to operate. And we basically, the heart of our operations is to look at these problems, some of these problems that I've outlined. There are others, and we make art projects that intersect with a lot of these issues. And I can go on and do a whole other 45 minutes about these projects, but I'm going to just focus on one for now, and it's called Lucky Jew. It's also the title of where we got the title of this presentation. This is me performing as a lucky Jew, and I'm going to play you a short video now, so you can see a little bit more, understand a little bit more about this. I'm going to actually stop the share just for half a second, so I can restart it, just to make sure that I have given everyone, that I've done it properly. Yeah, share computer sound, good, super. All right. So here's a little video about this project. Hi, I'm Michael Rubenfeld, Canadian actor, living now in beautiful Kraków, Poland. When I first came to Poland, I started to see these on people's walls. You can see there's a Jew and another Jew. They're counting their money and they're writing in their book. People were selling them, people were buying them, they were putting them on their wall. People believe that putting these Jews up on their wall is lucky. It's for luck, primarily economic luck. That was surprising to me, particularly in Poland. Jews have not been very lucky in Poland. And it occurred to me that this is an opportunity. I built this. This is my frame. And on it, I've written the word lucky Jew, or Żyd na szczęście, which means Jew for luck. I'm going to go out onto the streets of Kraków today on Easter and sell some luck, sell some of me. I've had this made up. This is a picture of me counting my money. Well, actually, contemplating my money in this photo. I'm going to sell this, and people will put this on their wall for luck. Here I'm admiring my money. I'm just admiring it because my money is admirable. This is me just offering you money straight up. The hope is that if people purchase this, the money will just fall into their pockets. This is the Jew with the coin, the lucky Jew coffee mug. You know, usually people just put their Jews on their wall for luck, but with the coffee mug, people can drink their luck every morning. We're gonna go out onto the streets of Krakow and we're gonna try our luck. Na szczęście, na szczęście. Może kupić. Who wants? Autentyczne, na szczęście prawdziwe. Ja jestem Żydów i tu jest na szczęście, Żyd na szczęście, prawdziwe na szczęście. Jeśli macie obraz mnie, 100% na szczęście. Come with the photo?
All right, we'll see the photo, please.
I didn't know that people put Jews on their wall. It's an opportunity for a business. I see an opportunity for a business, and so I've taken it.
You've got Jewish roots. Right?
I'm 100% Jewish. Tam obraz! Jestem 100% Żydem tutaj. Tam nie są żydowski. Ja jestem Żydem. Jestem Żydem. Tu jest nie Żyd. Ja jestem Żyd. Tutaj. $330 zloty, and I'm sold out. Absolutely everything. Amazing. I love Poland. You too can buy your own Lucky Jew by going to luckyjew.pl. So as you can see, so this has been one of our most popular projects and one of our most controversial projects. I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of feelings about the project. It's good to note, important to note, as Ezra earlier stated, just a few days ago, we completed another project connected to these objects that we called the Lucky Jewathon. Some of you might have attended some things. Of course, ASPJ was a partner on the Lucky Jewathon. We had a couple of Australians who was a part, but essentially it was a 72-hour event where we, for 72 hours without stopping, we asked people from around the world to respond to the objects through panels, conversations, art projects, you know, et cetera, et cetera. It was a really wild, incredible event. I encourage you. I think that there are on the ASPJ Facebook page and our web and our page. There's a lot of video that's still up, and you can watch aspects of it. And essentially, I wanted to share this project because it's a really excellent example of the kinds of opportunities I see in Poland, and also a good reason why I continue to live in Poland, because, you know, these are problems that need to be resolved. And, you know, for me, I see these problems as opportunities, and, you know, FestivALT's become a really important part of, you know, both how we're looking at these things artistically, but also how we're actually finding ways to transform. So out of this Lucky Jew project and in even the Lucky Jewathon, we at FestivALT have been able to engage with the city. We have now a partnership with the city of Krakow. A task force has been created, and we're in conversation in partnership with the city about what to do with these images, about what to do with these images of Jews with coins that continue to exist. It's a very, very interesting subject, and we can talk about it a bit more afterwards. But it's a really incredible example of what something like FestivALT has been able to do, or to offer, what we've been able to do with FestivALT. And it's only one of many examples of how we're starting to help, I think, transform the contemporary landscape and how Jewishness is operating in the contemporary Polish landscape. Now, I want to, I'm moving sort of towards the ending, but there are a few things that I wanted to say and talk about. So I believe that Poland is one of the most significant contemporary Jewish spaces in the world. And contemporary is important because, of course, it used to be one of the most significant Jewish spaces in the world. And people wouldn't necessarily think of Poland in a contemporary way as important, but I believe that it is. Why? Identity politics. So for me, this means I've got an identity again, or it's shifted my relationship to my identity. I was born in Canada, and I'm grateful and feel fortunate about that, but I wasn't really born with a country. I wasn't born with a space that I was from. And it was really only because of Poland that I began to re-enter back into my Jewish identity. I personally didn't feel a particularly strong relationship with Israel. And so I really feel that a lot of the reason that I moved away from Jewish culture in general was particularly because I didn't really feel like I had a space or a real a contemporary history that I could hang my hat on to help me with my Jewish identity. And I'm just one of thousands of people who would say something similar. And I believe the potential for this to be true for many, many more people exists. It's a really important space for the negotiation of Jewish trauma. As we all know, we continue to experience trauma from the Shoah, and I believe that through building meaningful contemporary relationships to Poland, through reconnecting to Poland's pre-war history, to this beautiful landscape, to the positive aspects of Jewish culture, it's much more effective in helping us negotiate our trauma and find more positive ways towards healing. I think it's incredibly important to continue to focus on the Holocaust, and I believe that we shall never forget. But within the never forgetting, building positive relationships to this space that so many Jewish people are from, this part of the world that so many Jewish people are from, is a step towards healing. Poland is regenerating. It's, like I said earlier, it's one of the fastest growing Jewish communities in Europe, which is incredible. If you had told me that was true or that was even possible before I started coming to Poland, I would have laughed in your face. But the fact that Jewish culture is starting to thrive again in Poland is incredible. It also means that Hitler failed, which is important. And it means that the Jewish people are strong. And, for me, that was really, really inspiring. It inspired me to want to really step back into my to Jewish culture. I'm not particularly religious, but it felt like in Jewish culture never really Judaism never felt like a club. I always had a difficult time finding my way into the club, but I feel really strong and proud to be a part of this sort of culture that refuses to die in the place that by all accounts it should have died. And it's incredibly fascinating, this place. It's both an old and a new space, and so the way that Jewish culture is operating here is really fascinating. It's almost like a grassroots organization. And for me and for many Jews here who really don't necessarily feel like they necessarily fit in to the way Jewish culture is being practiced in certain parts of the world, or the hybrids of Jewish culture. And I think of like what Jewish culture has become in Canada is a hybrid. It's this evolving, and it doesn't necessarily look the same in all countries because it's so young in Poland. There's people are working so actively on trying to understand and discover what it means from all angles. And this is really, really interesting to see the rigor and how people are thinking about or trying to understand and figure out Jewish culture. And this has been really important for me because I feel like I fit in. I fit into that because I never really actively and rigorously wanted to do that for myself. I believe a strong contemporary Jewish Poland is important for the global Jewish community. It is where we are from. Not, of course, not everyone is from here, but the majority of Ashkenazi Jews were living in Poland or in the area. before the war, and we're cut off from that reality. And it's a shame. We should not be, because it's in my opinion, some of the most significant aspects of who we've become. All of the clues to who to why and who we are here. This is where our stories are from. So this is the same, along the same lines, contemporary Jewish culture in Poland, a strong Jewish community in Poland continues to be an access point for these narratives, an access point for these stories for Jews. If the community here is not strong, and I believe it needs to get stronger, and I believe it needs support to get stronger, these stories, these histories will fade, and I think that eventually we could potentially lose them. A contemporary Jewish Poland gives us continuity and meaningful connection to who we are. Again, I continue to say this, but for me, this is a very personal statement, and I'm not the only, and I know many people feel the same way. But I get a lot of people, a lot of Polish people, non-Jewish Polish people, these days especially, where there's a very problematic government, there's lots of issues. People go, why on earth would you live here in Poland when you're Canadian, when you could be living in Canada? Which to a lot of people seems like one of the best countries in the world. I'm sure a lot of people in Australia might argue. But it's more meaningful right now in my life to be living here in Poland. And I'm very proud to communicate that when people ask me why I live here. And we have more healing to do. As a people, as a Jewish people, in a global sense, there's continues to be a lot of trauma, continues to be a lot of healing that needs to be done, and support. And I believe that Poland is a really important place to be able to do that. I can't tell you the number of times people have come to Poland and were surprised by how much they were enjoying themselves here, surprised by how meaningful it was for people to be here, surprised people were to be able to encounter Jews in Poland. Because a lot of people come and they're afraid of coming to Poland. And as was I, and it's scary, but to have a strong Jewish community here supporting the regeneration of Jewish community and culture in Poland is incredibly important, because it continues to be that access point for Jews around the world to our history. It's important for the Jews of Poland. It's important for the Jewish visitors. We have to have that life to connect to, and not only death. So it's important to come to the camps. And of course, hundreds of thousands of people come a year. It's important to come and see the camps. It's important to see the horrors. But being able to then also juxtapose that with life is essential. I believe it's essential for anyone who comes to Poland. And that life needs to be with Jews. Who would have thought that this was possible, that this contemporary Polish reality was possible? It's still amazing to me. I love talking to people about it because they're shocked. I don't know. Maybe everything I've said today is old news, and you all know about it. If you listen to Shudrich talk, then I'm sure he gave you a lot of what I've said as well. And many people will kind of talk about it in this way. But I think it's still important to reiterate the fact that Jewish culture is existing in Poland the way it is right now, after everything that's happened, is wild to me. It's still one of the most incredible things I've encountered. Is it a miracle? I don't know, but if you come to Poland, you'll see for yourself. Thank you very much. That's all I'm going to do. That's the end of my talk, and I will now give it back over to Ezra. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michael. That was excellent. Really do appreciate you opening up, giving your personal insights into the real person, the Michael Rubenfeld, not necessarily just a character you're playing or portraying as an actor. So definitely appreciate the personal narrative, and I'm sure it resonated with many people who are listening. Time for a couple of questions now, Michael, if you're willing to answer them.
Sure. Yeah, of course. Happily. Yeah.
So I'll just start off with Nice and simple one. What's the relationship between FestivALT and the annual Klezmer Festival? That was submitted by Francis Prince.
So by the annual Klezmer Festival, I'm assuming you mean the Jewish Culture Festival, which is actually becoming less and less klezmer and more Israeli over the past few years, believe it or not. And our relationship is that we present our festival at the same time as the Jewish Culture Festival. Jewish Culture Festival is much older, much richer than us. So it's quite large, but we very purposefully started our festival at the same time because Poland becomes a kind of like or Krakow becomes like a Jewish culture days because of the festival. So the JCC programs work, the Galicia Jewish Museum programs work, we program work, and so we operate in our sort of from our perspective, we operate in support. We like to think that we operate in support of the Jewish Culture Festival, which is quite large. I believe its primary focus is on the celebration of Jewish culture. And there are a lot of aspects to that are magnificent. And we exist because we really wanted to focus on, we wanted to create a critical space to focus on, not just the celebration, but the problems, these kind of problems, these traumas, these complications that we feel need to be worked on, need to be focused on. And we felt like, for a lot of Jewish people coming to Poland, we felt like we understood there was a lot of people who were also looking to be able to find a space to focus a bit more critically. So, you could go to a Cantor's concert, you could go to a Cantor's concert in the evening, but in the day you might be able to kind of go on a walk with us in Płaszów, which is the former concentration camp in Krakow. So that's our relationship. We've done some things with them, but really our focuses are very different. Also, the Jewish Culture Festival's focus tends to be primarily on music, and we don't focus on music so much. Or if we do focus on music, there tends to be a kind of experimental entry point into how we use music in our programming.
Thank you. Does FestivALT plan to reach out to smaller towns outside of the main cities in Poland?
Well, I mean, interestingly enough, FestivALT, we're starting to evolve because this year we had a really interesting year because of COVID, we ended up becoming a 6-month program instead of a 10-day festival. This is something that we consider to be part of our program even, and it's been really great to be a year-round, to become year-round. More work, but what it's shown us is that we really want to continue to be year-round, and so we're evolving, and we're actually going to be rebranding a little bit. So we're going to continue to do FestivALT, our festival, but we're also starting something that we're calling CentrALT, which is going to be a year-round space. We're hoping will eventually become a real space in some time if we could find the support, and it will be a space for art and research and art research residency, etc. And it will be and I bring all of this up because we will be rooted in Krakow, but our goal with CentrALT will be all of Poland and beyond. So. When you asked, we reach out to smaller towns. So far, we've done a little bit of stuff in Warsaw and in Lublin, which I wouldn't call smaller towns, but we would like to be doing more work in smaller towns. We would like to be doing more work in bigger spaces. We would like to be doing much, much more work in general. Our capacity to do that right now doesn't exist. Part of that is resource and just, and people power. So this is something that we hope to do in the future. And we hope that CentrALT, which is this institution that we're starting, will be something that could support those kinds of activities.
Sounds good. Now we're ready for some tougher questions, Michael?
Yes, always.
Unleashing. Based on your presentation, at the start, you said that the Holocaust was largely unspoken between you and your mother, but it had a really severe impact and quite overbearing in your relationship between the two of you. So what aspect of that initial trip that you took in 2012 changed that, and therefore did you speak about the Holocaust, or was that a gateway to wider Poland?
So I wouldn't say that we didn't speak about the Holocaust. I would actually say that we only spoke about the Holocaust, to be honest. And that, when we talked about our history, it was always through the lens of the Holocaust. So what making this piece did was it gave us something else to talk about when we talked about Poland. We do have something else to talk about when we talk about Poland now. That's very consistent. My mother would say, but did you have to move to Poland? I don't think that if I had told her at the beginning, oh, by the way, at the end of this play we're going to make together, I'm going to move to Poland, I think she would have said, no way. She doesn't love that I live here, but she understands it, but she misses me. And Magda and I have a son, and she doesn't get to see him. And, of course, during COVID, it's been even worse. It's still quite bad in Poland. And so we've not been able to go to Canada for over a year now. We toured this play for 5 years, and we might tour it even more, and that's also been really important. My mother and I, we have this thing that we made together, which was also a really big part of this project, because we didn't really have anything that we shared. We didn't have a country that we shared. Our narratives were really miserable, and so whenever we talked, it was hard to kind of land on something positive to talk about. For a long time we had this play to talk about and to do together quite consistently, and it was fun. We've gone around the world. My mother's toured Poland 2 times with this play. With me, of course. We've been to London. That didn't go great because of health reasons, but we were there. We went to Berlin. We've performed the play all over Canada, Winnipeg, where we're from. It's been really exciting for us all. And also we do have Poland. Like my mother, we just did this Lucky Jewathon that ended on Sunday, and one of the first people to write me was my mother, because she, attended a lot of the events, and she said it was one of the best things she thinks we've done. And so, she cares about Poland. She has a different relationship to Poland as well. But it's ongoing. I think the relationship you have with your mother, or the issues you might have with your mother, they don't just get solved overnight. And I'm not sure that they ever necessarily get solved, but we're in conversation with them.
One other thing is that, thank you, that it feels more meaningful for you to be Jewish in Poland. So if you want to just dive deeper a little bit into that, because obviously that element is missing in Canada, and I assume would be in Australia as well, because they're pretty similar, 1 or number 2 in the world. So is it a sense of respect to the ancestors who are buried in Poland? Or is it a feeling of loyalty to the Polish state for hosting them? What exactly do you define that element to be?
I don't feel a loyalty to the Polish state at all.
Yeah. I figured as much.
But absolutely. You can't escape history here. You can't escape it, and so. I feel like Canada is a space, and again, this is very, very personal. I think it is very meaningful for many people. I know it's very meaningful to be Jewish for people all around the world, but this is really only my narrative. And for me, I had a difficult time finding an entry point in Canada. And I think this is the theory that I'm working with right now, is that I think that it's because a lot of people come to Canada because they're trying to get away from history. That's what the country exists for. It's amazing. It's an amazing space. It's a very young country. Of course, not so unsimilar to Australia. I'm not talking about our Indigenous history, because this is a whole other topic. But in terms of the kind of immigrant, many people immigrate to Canada because they're either trying to escape situations that are not good, or they're trying to leave. A lot of people are trying to leave the past behind, including, the Jews who came after the war, before the war. They really wanted to sort of start these new lives, the new country. And I didn't understand that I actually needed history. I needed my history. I needed old country. I needed that line. I needed that connection to feel attached to this culture. I'm a storyteller. I'm an actor and a storyteller. And so, narrative is really important to me. And I didn't really have a narrative other than the Holocaust that to identify with, and because that's just such a hard narrative to operate with, I just didn't feel I started to move away from it, and it was coming to Poland that allowing myself to reconnect to this longer, more positive narrative. And, not all every day sort of sitting and reading and studying or focusing on it, but it's there. It's always there. So, when we do Shabbat on Friday, I never would do Shabbat, but now doing Shabbat is very important to my wife and I. It was always important to more important to Magda than me, but it's become important to me because it never feels like we're just doing it for me. The space that I'm in right now used to be a former Jewish tenement, and it feels meaningful to be living here. The child that my wife, that Magda and I have, being able to offer him a Shabbat every Friday feels really important because he's a part of continuing a line I really feel like our existence here is meaningful and useful. So all of these things matter. And I'm also an actor by nature, which means I like to act. And I don't mean act necessarily on stage, but to act in life, to do things. And I have a lot that I want to do that intersects with Jewish culture here as part of why FestivALT exists. And that is a really important part of helping me connect to Jewish culture here. Although I acted in Jewish plays a lot in Canada, it never really felt like it never felt like it was as useful in the way that it feels useful. It feels needed here.
You highlighted some aspects of the problematic Jewish culture, was not authentic really, and that most of the people who attend are local non-Jews. So you can look at it two ways, positive and negative. The positive being that they're interested in Jewish culture and they want to preserve it and make sure that it's not eradicated, and that the memory of what the Jewish population of Krakow or wherever the city comes from, that is still maintained and retained. The negative view is that people would say, or some people do say, which I'm sure you've heard, the Poles are happy to have their Jews in that culture very limited and restrained and sanitized even, as long as we control it as such. But then the positive would be, again, that the Jews aren't a big enough segment of the population or the artistic population to promote and provide that cultural aspect. So the element is, how problematic do you find the non-Jewish versus the Jewish interpretation of the Jewish culture? And also, is there an audience for the Jewish culture, that for your particular Jewish culture, FestivALT, that's for a non-Jewish audience?
I'll try to remember all of the questions, but there's absolutely an audience for what we're doing. I mean, we've been doing a whole a series of walks, a whole series of in-person events this year when it's been safe to. And I would say the majority of our audience is non-Jewish, particularly now, because one of the things during the Jewish Culture Festival, we would play to a lot of Jews because there's a lot of Jewish tourists. And also non-Jews, but I would say that we're playing almost 80% right now to non-Jews when we're doing in-person events in Krakow. I personally think Poland is full of many progressive intellectual people, hugely progressive people. It's a really divided country between those who want to stay in the past and a government that's holding it in the past. And, you'll see hundreds of thousands of people protesting on the street for women's rights, for LGBTQ rights. And this is you can see on the streets, you can see in the people that they want the country to progress. I've met some of the smartest, most interesting people in the world in Poland, the most engaged people. I find there are a lot, those sort of who operate within kind of educational or intellectual circles. And not only, but people are very, very interested in seeing this country progress. And, in order to progress, one of the major aspects of this country that this country needs to work on is how it reconciles its history. And so, you know, we're one of the very few people who are offering a space for people to intersect with that conversation in a contemporary way. We're not the only ones, but I think that we're one of the most interesting. And I think, you know, I think if anything, what we've not done as good a job at is cultivating a strong local audience, because we've been so immersed in these Jewish culture days where there's Jews from all over the world, and we've been local. So, you know, a lot of the easy audience has been Jews, visiting Jews, not only, but what we're starting to do a really good job at now is making sure that we find, or that the people who wants to find us, who need to find us, do. And so we're in fact growing our audience. And I think that part of the reason that we're wanting to start FestivALT is because we know there are hundreds of thousands of people who would be interested in what we're doing, non-Jewish people, but they don't know how to find us. We're too small right now. We don't have enough support or capacity for people to find us. This is why we also want a space. We want a space in Kazimierz, because, you know, the amount of people who come looking for Jewish culture, non-Jewish people who are looking for Jewish culture, who are interested in Jewish culture, but, you know, they find, you know, strange museums or, you know, or only places that are themed, and they take it because it's the best they can get. But I can't tell you how many people are interested in Jewish culture. If anything, the problem is more the opposite. People are too obsessed with Jewish culture. They're too interested with Jewish culture, and they'll take whatever they can, but, you know, they're not necessarily ingesting things that are as nuanced or, you know, as possible. And this is sort of why, this is a huge reason for why we operate. I think that in some ways we're most important for non-Jews in Poland than Jews. In terms of the other thing, in terms of you know, the anti-Semitism, you know, there's the Jewish. There's anti-Semitism here still, for sure. I'm less worried about anti-Semitism actually in Poland than I am in America or places like Sweden. Jews are not, there's not a ton of Jews in Poland. I mean, there are a lot of Jews, but Jewish culture, you know, this space is not overwhelmed by Jewish culture the way it once was. And so, you know, I think that until Jews feel like a genuine threat to, you know, the Polish culture and to Polish people, I don't think that people are going to feel like they need to control Jewish culture. I don't feel like that's so important at the moment, because in the grand scheme of things, it's not really a threat. So I would say that the majority of people are coming more because they're fascinated, they're interested, they want to know more about this culture that used to exist here, that no longer does. I don't think it's always so meaningful. I think some people are just like, wow, that's cool. I think that for some young people too, Jewish culture is kind of cool. You know, in places like Canada or Australia, where I don't know if this exists in Australia, but, you know, it's certainly in Canada. There's this thing of like people taking pride that they might have a percentage of their blood that's Indigenous. Like, oh, I'm 1/25 Aboriginal, or something like this. In a way, Jewish culture sort of works the same way here. Like, people are hoping to find a little bit of Jewishness in them. It's, you know, it almost makes them a bit cooler. Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about that, but that's part of a reality here.
One, perhaps a final question is, how do you respond to the criticism that the Polish governmental support for Jewish culture, which is quite significant, generally comes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs rather than the Ministry of Education under the current government? And you could argue that they're using that as a fig leaf to try to stay on side with America, as opposed to really penetrate into the Polish population.
Oh, that's a good question. It's a good question. I've not thought too much about it, to be honest. I mean, we have, in fact, gotten funding this year from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We could, it's really tricky, because I have a lot of feelings about the current government and the way that they do things. And, and it's an interesting position to be in, to get support, not insignificant support, to be able to bring what we do outside of Poland. And we hope to continue to get that kind of support. But I think that in general, what is true is that the government does try to control and is controlling the narrative within education in Poland. And that's not just about Jewish culture, it's about everything. It's about trying to create a very specific narrative around what Polish culture is and what it means, how that relates to Catholicism, how that relates to LGBTQ. Andrzej Duda in the last election ran a campaign, and he very kind of loudly condemned LGBTQ ideology, in ways that I found completely shocking. I think it would be considered hate speech in some countries, but here it's legal. So, when it comes to the government, it's true. Like internally, what they're doing is, I think very problematic and controlling. So what does that mean? It means we do what we can. We work with the government how we can right now. We appreciate the money that we do get. We're also working with city governments. So right now, the city government in Krakow and us are building a really interesting partnership on many different projects, on Płaszów, on these lucky Jews, on other things. And we really feel supported by them in ways that are surprising us. And so, this is also how we operate. I think that we're hoping that with the government of Krakow, we'll be finding ways to do educational campaigns about these Jew with coins. And we're hoping this is probably just the beginning. We're already having conversations about going into schools here in Krakow with support from the city government. So this is the situation that we're in. I'm not going to lie. I think that on a but on a national level, the situation that Poland is in is not good. It's bad, depending on who you ask. If you're, right-wing, a voter for the Peace Party, you'll be very happy. But if you are liberal or are looking for a more kind of progressive space, you'll be very, very unhappy. And there are a lot of people who I know who are wanting to leave this country. And
they want
to justify. Sure, I'll answer anything.
So there's a question regarding the FestivALT, the Lucky Jewathon that was just put on. How do you justify the presence of the Palestinian Freedom Theatre?
Sure. So, I mean, the word justify is an interesting word, because I think that, that's just, wanting to include someone. So this is one thing. I mean, really the reason that we included the Freedom Theater in the Lucky Jewathon is because, Jewishness in Poland, Judaism is often equated only with Zionism in Israel. And a lot of different people have different feelings about this, and I'm not, and I'm definitely a supporter of Israel. However, what is often absent in the narrative, in a Polish context, is the Palestinian narrative, is the Palestinian perspective, and to me, it feels for me, for my politics, I don't think it is right to have a conversation about Israel and not give voice to Palestinian people. for the Freedom Theater in particular, which is a theater company started by Jews, started by Israelis, for this very reason, to give voice in a space for Palestinian people. The work that they're doing, which is I find really interesting, is really important work. There are many Jews from around the world who go there and do volunteer work with the Freedom Theater, and I think what they're doing is really excellent work. And so for me, we're a Jewish, as a Jewish organization in a country that's trying to limit the voices, to limit space for certain narratives, for certain conversations. As Jews, it feels irresponsible to not also create space for Palestinian people to have voice. And I think people can agree or disagree. People are free to agree or disagree with what people say. And I think that's what it means to be. It's important to be free, but I think to give people space and voice is really essential. And that's why we decided to include the Freedom Theater, so that they have the opportunity to have voice in a context where they never have voice at all.
Thank you. And just lastly, in that video of the Lucky Jew, when you went out there and you sold your pictures of yourself as the Lucky Jew, so obviously that was a highlighted package of the reactions from most people. Did most people the reactions from generally what people saw, were most people just nonplussed by the whole thing, or did some actually get shocked, or did some actually embrace it? How would you categorize the general reactions?
Well, there's not one reaction. There's many different reactions. I would say that probably the most overwhelming reaction is apathy, believe it or not, which is really interesting to me, where it's, this practice is so normalized to the point that we could be in a public market space and people could just sort of walk by it and be like, or like not interested. That to me is really fascinating, that it could just sort of be overlooked, because what we're doing is really wild, and we really stick out. The first time we did it, I just thought, my God, people are going to, I don't know what's going to happen. It was really surprising, but a lot of people just were like, Now, of course, that's not the only reaction that people have. There are a lot of people who do recognize what we're doing, who recognize the satire and the commentary in what we're doing, and they think it's funny or clever or smart. There are some people who don't recognize the satire and what we're doing and actually tell us to our face that what we're doing is a problem, is problematic. Not just Jews, but not non-Jews. It's more from non-Jews. And I really actually like it when people come up to us and they don't necessarily recognize that it's an art project, and they just think that what we're doing is a problem. Because it is, I think what we're doing is something that is incredibly problematic for the sake of making a commentary and having a conversation about the practice itself. And there are a lot of people who just buy them. And in a way, they buy them not because they want to own them, and that's a lot of our audience as well. Like, I think the majority of our audience, because it allows us to have conversations with people, because people will come and they'll ask what's kind of going on. They'll be interested in the objects, and we'll talk about them. And for a lot of people, we might be the first time they've had even a conversation with a Jew before, but they might have put a Jew on their wall, but they've not necessarily talked to one in real life. And so from that perspective, it's fascinating, why people buy them. Some people just think that they are going to be lucky, and so they'll put them on their wall. And but some people are buying, a lot of people are buying them, and a lot of people are buying these objects in general, or making these objects in general, because people feel like they are somehow contributing to the memorialization of the Jewish people. People don't buy these objects because they're anti-Semitic. They buy them because they genuinely want to own a Jew and put them on the wall. It's bonkers, but it's true. So yeah, so when people come, we get into all sorts of conversations. When people buy an object, the objects have stickers on the back of them that explain that this is part of it's an art practice connected to exploring the practice of buying and selling these objects. And they also receive a little card explaining what FestivALT is. And it's our hope that they'll continue to walk away with one of these objects and kind of go, why is this even a problem for these people? What's problematic about it? And those are conversations we have with people in real life as well. So anyways, to make a long story longer, there's not one specific reaction to it when we do it. But one of the things we realized during the Lucky Jewathon actually is that we actually spend a lot more time talking about the project than actually doing the project, which is, to me, part of what's most interesting about the project.
Well, thank you very much, Michael. That was excellent. But most importantly, have you had feedback that it works? Pictures of yourself.
Does it work in terms of? Well, I don't know.
Lucky, good fortune.
I've been sitting with my with a Lucky Jew mug during the course of this presentation, and I think it's gone pretty well. I'm pretty happy with how it went. I mean, I think if you think it's gone well, if you've enjoyed this time, then I would say that they're pretty lucky. That these objects are pretty lucky.
So thank you very much. I consider the ASPJ and everybody who's attended tonight incredibly lucky to have heard your story. So I'm sure we'll be putting a picture of you on our wall. And thank you very much. We look forward to having a partnership.
One last thing is, if you're not a member of our mailing list and you are interested in being a part of the FestivALT mailing list, so you can continue to get information of our upcoming projects, and a lot of we always have an Australia friendly time. We make sure to do some Australia friendly times. Please send your email to the Q&A, and we will add you. And I'll also, Ezra, can I just give people my email address if people want to continue to write or?
Absolutely, yeah.
So you can get in touch with me. How do I do this? All panelists and attendees. So if you want to continue to talk, I'm happy to. I know you can write me at michael@festivalt.com. I know that David, I'm just sort of looking that a lot of people, oh, thank you. Yeah. I know a lot of different people might have more feelings and more thoughts. A big part of why I live in Poland is to be able to be someone, to be an access point also for Jews from around the world, to be able to have these conversations. And I really do hope that you get in touch if and when you come to Poland, when you do. Okay, that's all.
Thank you once again, Michael. That was excellent. On behalf of everybody, appreciate your time and appreciate your effort and your candid answers to all the questions. And thank you, everybody, for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at future FestivALT and certainly future ASPJ events. Please be in touch with us. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Ezra. I really appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening. Again, if anyone else wants to give me their email address, please feel free to, and we'll add you to our mailing list. Probably end the recording.
Yeah, we still are. We're still live on Facebook.
Oh, still live.
Yeah. I'll just say that email address that was put up there, Michael, there's a spelling error. It's at optusnet.com.au, optusnet.com.au, no G in there.
optusnet.com.au.
Yeah, not OPGTUS, it's OPTUSNET. That G is a mistake. Can you see that in the Q&A?
Let me just see which.
So they're all at optusnet.com. So at 9:38. Eva.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Eva. Yeah.
Optus is one of our communications companies, so that's a spelling mistake.
I see. Oh yeah, there's a few Optus nets.
Yeah,
Eva,
yeah, yeah.
and then someone else.
Yeah.
Julie Meadows and that. Let's see. Oh, great. People, a few different people added. That's nice.